All right, guys, we are going to be doing rounding decimals, which is lesson 4.5. In this lesson, we're going to be able to use number lines and place value, understanding to round decimals to a given place. We're also going to be able to continue understanding the place value system. So for a little warm-up, let's write the following decimals and then identify the digits in the given places. So we have 917 and 203 thousandths. They want us to circle the digit in the hundredths place and put an X through the digit in the tens place. So again, taking a look at what it's asking you to do here, we want to circle, we want to circle the digit in the hundredths place and place an X through the digit in the tens place. So pause your video, write this number out, and complete this task. So hopefully you're writing 917 and 203. So we see 203 thousandths. And they want us to circle the digit in the hundredths place. So I'm going to change my color here for you. I'm going to circle my hundredths place, which is that 0. And because we go tenths, hundredths, thousandths, and then we're going to place an X through the tens, which would be my 1. So you should have something that looks like this, an X through the 1, and a circle around that 0. Our vocabulary review is the word round. So to change a number slightly to make it easier to work with or to make it better reflect the level of precision of the data, often numbers are rounded to the nearest multiple of 10, 100, 1000, and so on. For example, 12,964, that could be rounded to the nearest thousand as 13,000. Go ahead and turn to page 123. And what I want you to do is complete the math message here. So part 1 says to shade the grid at the right and show 0 and 28 hundredths, or 0.28. You'll notice that this grid is a hundreds grid, so it's got 100 little squares. And then you're going to answer the question. Is 0.28 or 0 and 28 hundredths closer to 2 tenths or 3 tenths? And use the grid to help you decide. Be ready to explain your reasoning. And again, 0.28 or 0 and 28 hundredths is closer to, you're either going to write 2 tenths or 3 tenths. So go ahead and work on that. Pause the video. So what I want you to do is picture 2 tenths and 3 tenths on that hundredths grid and think about the tenths as equivalent numbers for hundredths. For 2 tenths, we should think of 20 hundredths, and for 3 tenths, we should think of 30 hundredths. And so when we think about the distances between 0.2 and to 0.28 and then 0.3, hopefully we are understanding that 28 hundredths is 2 hundredths from 3 tenths, and it's 8 hundredths away from 2 tenths. So 0 and 28 hundredths is actually closer to 3 tenths than it is to 2 tenths. Number lines are another representation you can use to find the distance between numbers. So hopefully you had a answer just like this. You can see over at the right, we have 28 hundredths filled in, or we see 2 tenths and then 8 hundredths right here. And we see we only need 2 more little boxes filled in to create that 3 tenths. So that is closer. Turn to page 123 if you're not there, and look at problem number 3 for me. This question says to label the number line below to show whether 0.28 or 28 hundredths is closer to 2/10 or 3/10. So you just figured out that it's closer to 3/10. So when we're looking at a number line, what could we do, or how could we show where 0.28 is going to fall on this number line? Where do you think? Would it be closer to this dash mark or this benchmark of 0.2, 2/10, or would it be closer to this benchmark of 3/10? What you could do is list them out, but hopefully you understood that it was going to be further over to the right on this number line because we did say that it was closer to 3/10. What you see here is we've listed out all the little hundredths within there. So we see we've got 2/10 or 20 hundredths. We got 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, and then this would be 30 hundredths. And so 28 hundredths would land right here. How does this number line show that 28 hundredths is closer to 3/10 than 2/10? You can see that it is only 2 little skips over to 3/10, and it is 8 skips from 2/10 to 28 hundredths. Why were we deciding between 2/10 and 3/10? Why didn't we consider 4/10 or 9/10 for 28 hundredths? Think about that. We're going to use number lines and our understanding of place value to continue rounding decimals. So when we go back to this one, we think about rounding and we see that this is a 2. So if we're rounding, when we're rounding whole numbers, say 28, we would never say that we were going to round 28 to 40. We wouldn't say rounding 28 to 90. That's why we did not consider those. We only considered 0.2 and 0.3, or 2/10 and 3/10. So consider how you would round 28 hundredths to the nearest whole number. Think about that. How would we decide what whole number this would round to? Between what two whole numbers is 0 and 28 hundredths? And how do you know? It is actually between the numbers 0 and 1. How can we use this number line to round 28 hundredths to the nearest whole number? Here we can list out different benchmarks between 0 and 1. One way that I would do this is by marking out all the tenths. I don't want to make 100 marks, right? I'd rather make my tenths there. So I know this would be 10 tens. So I would have 5 right here, or 0.5. So we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And each one of these is actually worth a tenth. So this would be 0.1, right? 0.2, 0.3, and so on. And then we'd have all the way up to 0.9. So when we're doing this, we want to think about, well, earlier when I was looking at this 0.2, when I was looking at 0.28, I knew that it was closer to 0.3. So on a problem like this, I can estimate and say, all right, well, 0.28 or 0 and 28 hundredths would probably land right there where that purple dot is. And I'm using my knowledge of rounding. I knew that I was rounding this to 0.3 or 3/10, and I knew it was between 0 and 2/10 and 3/10, so it would go right there. So we've talked about that. So this is exactly them showing what the thought process that I just showed you. Okay, so these are things to consider. When you round up to a lower number, such as rounding 0.28 to 0, you're rounding down, because we saw on this that 0.28 ended up on the left side of 1/2, and so it would round down to 0. In the math message problem, you round it up. when you determined that 0 and 28 hundredths was closer to the higher number, 3/10. Let's look at an example. Your parents are at Gus's gas station and see that a gallon of gas costs $3 and 619 thousandths of a cent. Okay, 619 thousandths. They want to estimate how much it will cost to fill up. What's the price of a gallon of gas rounded to the nearest cent or hundredth of a dollar? Because what we're used to is seeing 2 digits with money. We only go to the hundredths when we're working with dollars and cents. This 9 is usually not something that we work with. But what you'll notice when you're near a gas station next time, you'll see it written a little bit different than this. So you'll see your dollar sign, and you'll see $3 and then 61 cents, and then they raise the thousandths into a little 9 up here. So next time you buy a gas station, I challenge you to look for that little 9. And so what they're doing is they're making you think that it's $3.61. But really this 9 is going to tell my 1 to do something. It's either going to round down or it's going to round up. So $3.61, the 9, tells my 1 to go up. So really, your parents are paying $3.62 for their gallon of gas, because that 9 is telling the 1 to go up. So again, how can a number line help us solve this problem? It helps us give a visual, right? It lets us take a look at it and see, all right, what is it closer to? So what I want you to do now is turn to page 123 and look at number 4. What number is halfway between $3.61 or 3.61, 3 and 61 hundredths, and 3 and 62 hundredths? How do you know what is halfway between? Record that information on problem 5B. Take a moment, pause if you need to. Think about what would be halfway. We know 0.5 is halfway between 0 and 1. So what would be halfway between 3.61 and 3.62? So for number 4, it said shade the grid to the right to show 0.619, or 0 and 619 thousandths. And what you can see here is we have six rows completely filled in. That gives us that 6/10 right there. Then we have 1 right here, 1 whole hundredth shaded in, and then 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9 teeny tiny rectangles, or 9 thousandths shaded in. So we want to decide what 2 hundredths is 3 and 619 thousandths between. And we see here we have 619 thousandths, which is almost, we only need 1 little thousandth, that right there, to shade in, and it would be 3.62. So we see that it's between 3 and 61 hundredths and 3 and 62 hundredths. What number would be exactly halfway between these two? It would be 3 and 615, because remember that 5 is the halfway mark. So on problem 6, label the number line and use it to round 3 and 619 thousandths. Pause the video. Here is something similar to what you should have put in, So we know that 3 and 619 thousandths is going to round to 3 and 62 tenths. And the number line that would help us is that we've got 3.61, 3.62, and then we made our middle number of 3 and 615 thousandths right in the middle. And I'm going to add some lines to this just to get a better understanding. Okay, so here I added the other thousandths. So this would be 3 and 610 thousandths. This would be 3 and 611 thousandths. 3 and 612, 3 and 613, 3 and 614, 3 and 615, because that 5 is the middle. 3 and 616, 3 and 617, 3 and 618. Here's the number we were talking about. That was horrible. 3 and 619. Let's do this. That one right there. That's the number we were looking at, and that's what we're trying to round. We see that it is clearly on the far right end of this number line, and it only needs to move up one little thousandth to get to 3.62. It's just another visual for you. So again, rounding the price of the gas to the nearest dime or tenth of a dollar, we would actually be paying $3.62. So what you want to do is create a number line using the following steps. So we want to round 3 and 619 thousandths to the nearest tenth. Think between which two tenths is 3 and 619 thousandths. And we said it was between 3 and 6 tenths and 3 and 7 tenths. Label a number line with 3 and 6 tenths and 3 and 7 tenths on either end. Think, what number is halfway between 3 and 6 tenths and 3 and 7 tenths? It's 3 and 65 hundredths. Label the tick marks in the middle of the number line at 3 and 65 hundredths. Compare 3 and 619 thousandths to the halfway point. 3 and 619 thousandths is actually less. It's less than 3 and 65 hundredths. So place 3 and 619 thousandths to the left of 3 and 65 hundredths on the number line. Since 3 and 619 thousandths is closer to 3 and 6 tenths, you want to round down to 3 and 6 tenths. To the nearest tenth of a dollar, the price is $3.60. So if you needed to pause to work on this and to think through the steps, go ahead and do that. Here is an image of what we just talked about. You can see on this one, it is on the left-hand side of the halfway point, and it is closer to 3 and 6 tenths. Now it is your turn. Turn to page 124. You're going to be doing some practice here. We will talk about the first one. So it says use the number lines to round each number. Be sure to label the tick marks on each number line. So number 1 says to round 3 and 6 tenths to the nearest whole number. So here is an example of what we did here. We numbered this number line with the numbers 3 and 4 because we see 3.6, and I know that it's going to be between 3 and then the next whole number would be 4. So based on the number line, we did the halfway mark of 3.5, and we put 3.6 or 3 and 6 tenths to the right of it because the 6 is larger than the 5, and that tells us that it's actually closer to the whole number of 4, and we rounded up. So your job now is to try number 2 and 3 here. So we've got rounding 2 and 73 hundredths to the nearest tenth. Round 2 and 73 hundredths to the nearest whole number. So you're going to do 2 of those with 2 and 73 hundredths. Then number 4, 5, and 6, you're going to round 4 and 254 thousandths to the nearest hundredth. And you're going to round 4 and 254 thousandths to the nearest tenth, and then you're going to round that number to the nearest whole number. So you're working with the same decimal, but rounding it to different places: hundredths, tenths, and then the whole number. Okay? So go ahead and pause your video now, and then come back, and we'll check our work together. All right, you should be finished with your work by now because you've started the video back up. So we've completed number 1 together, and we decided that was 4, and it was rounding up. Number 2, we were rounding it to the nearest tenth. If you take a look at this example, should have had 2 and 7/10 on the left, 2 and 8/10 to the right, 2 and 75 hundredths in the middle. This would end up on the left side of that. And we are going to round the number to 2 and 7/10, and we rounded it down because that 3 tells my 7 to stay, so the number goes down. Now rounding it to the nearest whole number, we went between 2 and 3. We've got 2.5 or 2 and 5/10 in the middle. So since the 7 is larger than the 5, we're putting it over here to the right. And so we see that is closer to the 3, and so we actually round it up to the nearest whole number of 3. Number 4, we are actually rounding down, and you can see that we rounded 4 and 255 thousandths down, or 4 and 254 thousandths down to 4 and 25 hundredths. Rounding it down to the nearest tenth, or rounding up, we've got 4 and 25 thousandths, or hundredths. My goodness, I'm sorry. We see that 4 and 254 thousandths is actually to the right of this middle number, telling me that we're going to actually round up to 4 and 3/10. And then finally, taking a look at this, we've got the 2 here. And we know the 2 is going to tell the 4 to either go down to 4, or it's going to go up to 5. You're actually rounding down. So you see we've got between the whole numbers of 4 and 5. We know 4.5 is midway. 4 and 254 thousandths is less than 4.5. So it tells us we're going to round down. So what did you notice about the halfway numbers on that journal page? What did you notice about the numbers that we rounded down? And what did we notice about the numbers we rounded up? Hopefully you noticed that the 5, the digit 5, is always representative of a halfway point because we work in base 10. So if you notice, the numbers that we rounded down were less than 5, and the ones that we rounded up were greater than 5. We're talking about those digits. So when a number is exactly halfway between two numbers, the convention is to round that number up. Okay, so again, like I just said, when the digit is to the right is 4 or less, we round down. When the digit to the right is 5 or greater, we round up. So ask yourself, why does it make sense to round down if the digit to the right is less than 5? Seems that we could use these patterns as a shortcut for rounding. Let's test some of those out with our gasoline problem to see whether we get the same results. So if you take a look here, it says to round 3 and 619 thousandths dollars to the nearest hundredth of a dollar. So what they did here is they underlined the digit in the place we are going to round to 1. We will either round down to 3.61 or up to 3.62. Look at the digit to the right, and that's a 9. You can see the work over here. Think, is 9 greater than or less than 5? 9 is greater than 5, so we're going to round up to 3.62. So you can see that the 9 is telling the 1 to go up. So to the nearest hundredth of a dollar, the price is $3.62, or 3 and 62 hundredths of a dollar. This is the result we found using the number line. So for 3.619, We underline the digit to the place value. We're rounding to 6 because this one we're going to round to the nearest tenth of a dollar. We either round down to 3.6 or we're going to round up to 3.7. Look at the digit to the right. It's a 1. Okay, because the 6 is what we're looking at, and the digit to the right is a 1 this time because we're looking at the tenths place. Think, is 1 greater than or less than 5? 1 is less than 5, so we're going to round this 6. We're going to keep it to 6, so the whole number rounds down to 3.6. To the nearest tenth of a dollar, the price is $3.60. This is the result we also found using that number line. And so we're going to practice that portion of rounding on page 125. Looks a little bit different here. It says, at the district track meet, each running event is timed to the nearest thousandth of a second using an electronic timer. However, the district's track rules require times to be reported with only 2 decimal places. Round each time to the nearest hundredth of a second. So you're going to see in each of these, they are rounded to the thousandths. That's where they've stopped. And so you're going to round them to the hundredths. So for example, for A, we have 10 and 752 seconds, 752 thousandths of a second. And so I'm going to show you here. We are looking at the tenths place. That's what we want to decide. So the 2, the thousandths, is going to tell me what to do with that 5. So I see the 2 is less than 5, so the 5 is going to stay the same. So I'm going to report it as 10.75 seconds. 10 and 75 hundredths of a second. So I want you to do that same thing on this page. I want you to continue the work here, looking at the thousandths, decide if the hundredths is going to stay the same, meaning round down, or if it's going to round up. Then I want you to explain how you rounded 20 and 98 thousandths. And then number 2, supermarkets often show unit prices for items. This helps customers compare prices to find the best deal. A unit price is found by dividing the price of an item in cents or dollars and cents by the quantity of the item, often in ounces or pounds. When the quotient has more decimal places than are needed, some stores round the nearest tenth of a cent. So for example, a 16-ounce container of yogurt costs $3.81. $3.81 times 100 cents per dollar equals 381 cents. 381 divided by 16 equals 23.8125 cents per ounce. We're going to round that down to 23.8 cents per ounce. So what I want you to do here, you don't have to do those first 2 parts. They've already done that for you. You're going to round each unit to the nearest tenth. So you've got 28 and 374 thousandths. You want to round that to the nearest tenth. So for example, again, I'm going to be looking at the tenths place, and the hundredths place is going to be the boss. Okay, so the thousandths place is going to tell me what is that 7 going to do. I see that it's 4 is less than 5, so I'm going to keep this at 28.37. 28.37. That does not look like a 28. Okay, so pause here, complete problem 1 and 2 on page 125 using that rounding method, and then come back and check with me. All right, so you'll see here, A was 10 and 75 hundredths. B, 55 and 74 hundredths. C, 16 and 82 hundredths. D, 43 and 51 hundredths. E, 20 and 10 hundredths, or 20 and 1/10. And then F, 53 solid, just 53, rounded to 53. So for E, 20 and 98 thousandths, we rounded it to 20 and 10 hundredths. We knew that 8 thousandths was more than halfway to the next hundredth, so we round up. Well, rounding a 9 to in the hundredths means having 10 hundredths, which is equal to 1/10. So we write 20.10 or 20 and 10 hundredths. So you see that 9 bumps the 0 up, which turns out to 1, 0. And then number 2, let's move these out of the way. Okay, we've got 20 and 4/10, 16 and 9/10, 18 and 5/10, 19 and 8/10, 20 and 6/10, and 22 solid. I made an error in A because I did not pay attention to the instructions. So make sure that you are paying attention, because this time it says the tenths place, not the hundredths. So you can see here, my error was I rounded it to the hundredths, and we were supposed to round it to the tenths. So hopefully you caught my error while you were working. So that is the end of our lesson. I'm going to show you quickly your math boxes for 4.5. This one is a number model and an estimate. This one's practicing with that grid. Number 3, adding fractions using benchmarks. Another number model. And then finally, number 5 is a written one explaining how you solved 3b. So if we look at 3b, it's 1 1/6 minus 3/5. You need to get in the practice of using complete sentences and thoughts and using cubes to answer those.